It is 5 o'clock somewhere, and you've tuned into the Season 1 finale of BRC. For those of you who'd like to watch this episode, it's available on our website, YouTube, and Spotify. Today in our Tales from the Still segment, I speak with Ryan Friesen from Connacht Distillery in Ireland about how he got into distilling and how this job took him from the Midwest to Southern California before crossing the pond. But first, let's see what's new in whiskey business. It's time now for Whiskey Business, where I report on new releases and other current events in the world of whiskey. This has been a very busy month for Impex Beverages. Not only have they introduced New Zealand single malt whiskey called Poceno in the American market, but they've also announced that they're taking over as Wolfburn Single Malt Scotch Distillery's new U.S. importer. In addition, Impex is releasing Hakata whiskey from Japan. Hakata is distilled and matured in Fukuoka, Japan by Hikari Distillery, which was founded in 1912. They put out a 10-year, 12-year, 16-year, and 18-year-old expression. Poceno whiskey is the largest single malt distillery in New Zealand. They use only pure volcanic spring water from the North Island's distilleries' surrounding hills, and family-farmed barley from New Zealand's rich, fertile South Island. Poceno selects only the finest casks to mature their spirit, and the warm subtropical climate accelerates maturation and flavor development. Lastly, Wolfburn Single Malt Scotch comes to us from the most northerly distillery on Scotland's mainland. Wolfburn's smooth, easy-drinking character stems from the way it is made, and it is matured in warehouses just a short distance from the ocean. To learn more about these spirits and where you can find them, please visit barrelroomchronicles.com for today's show notes. Up next, we speak with Ryan Friesen in this week's Tales from the Still. Stay with us.
There's nothing better than the smell of coffee in the morning. What if you could enjoy a coffee subscription of fresh, roasted specialty coffee while making a difference in the lives of the farmers that grow it? What if you also had access to a virtual coffee community of other coffee lovers and the coffee farmer and roaster? That's all part of the Farm to Cup Coffee Club subscription at Unleashed Coffee. Subscribe today. UnleashedCoffee.com.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and whenever it is you're watching or listening to the show today. Today on the show, we have Ryan Friesen from Connacht Distillery in Ireland on the wild Atlantic way. I was recently in Ireland and I was hoping to get out to this part of the country. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to make it all the way over there, but Ryan has been nice enough to send some samples and be here today to talk to us so we can find out more about him and this beautiful distillery. Ryan, welcome.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, sorry we missed you when you were out here. It would have been nice to have you come by the distillery.
Yes, well, hopefully I will be making another trip and we can make that happen in the future. Mm-hmm. So tell me, I ran into some former coworkers of yours while I was in New Orleans at the Tales of the Cocktail, Journeyman Distillery. And he's actually the one who gave me your contact because when I reached out to the distillery directly, there was no response. So tell me, you're American, you're in Ireland, you're running the show over there. Tell me about your whiskey journey. How did you start off in the whiskey industry? And when you were a wee little lad, did you ever imagine that this would be your career?
No, definitely not. To answer the last question, that was never, I probably didn't really know much about whiskey other than Jack Daniels until I was well out of college. Whiskey wasn't my thing. I was more of a craft beer guy. So that's kind of how I got into learning about alcohol and the alcohol industry. Started off home brewing. It would have been right after college. And made my first batch in my mother's kitchen, and it was drinkable. And from that point on, I was like, "Wait a minute, you can make your own alcohol? This is something new." But definitely didn't ever consider it as a career opportunity until I'd gone away for school and came back and wasn't having any luck finding a job in that field. And my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and we went to go see a movie up in Michigan, just across the border. We lived in South Bend, Indiana. And there's a little tiny theater there in Three Oaks, Michigan. And when I was Google mapping it, up on the next to the theater across the street said distillery. And I was like, what is that? That's really interesting. So after the movie, we drove by where the map said it was. And I did one of these, like looking through the window, and it looked really cool inside. And I went home and emailed them just the info at Journeyman. The person who came back to me turned out to be the owner, Bill Welter. And I said, hey, do you guys have any opportunities for somebody who wants to learn about what a distillery is and what you guys are doing? I'd come in for free. I'd just put them up in my hand. I'm just curious. And he said, absolutely. Come on over, and we're doing some bottling. So you can sit on the bottling line. I had no idea what that meant, but I went over, introduced myself, sat down, did a few hours of bottling, and I went to leave, and was sort of like, hey, thanks for the experience. That was really cool. Maybe I'll see you around. And he handed me a paycheck, which I wasn't expecting, and said, no, if you're working, you're getting paid.
Nice. So you ended up just hanging out and going to do this bottling, and you had no idea what was going to come of that.
No. And I'd certainly never been on a bottling line, and I wasn't familiar with the spirits that Journeyman made, and I didn't really have much of a concept of it, but I knew it was close to brewing, and I was interested in learning more about that. So I just took it as, it's a good learning experience. And cause I thought I was doing this for, a volunteer, and basically just said, if you work here, you get paid. And if you'd like to come back, we can use you. So I kept coming back that summer for about, 2 months or something like that, and doing the bottling. And for anyone out there who's sat on a bottling line, they know it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's part of that learning curve. You have to start somewhere.
Right.
And at some point in that summer, another distiller who was there put his keys on the table in the back, and basically said adios. And they turned to me and said, hey, Ryan, there's an opening. Would you like to come back and learn how to be a distiller? And I said yes, and it kind of went from there.
Wow. So what did you major in college that has nothing to do with what you're doing now?
Yeah, exactly. Very nothing to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. So I did history, philosophy, and communications.
Okay.
That turned into a job at a newspaper, a small newspaper in my hometown of Goshen, Indiana. I actually loved that job. It was really cool. But I moved, and the newspaper industry was changing to online media, and I didn't change with it. So I ended up then working in customer service in the aviation industry, and and then worked in education abroad. So sending students overseas for study abroad semesters, which was actually really great. And that's where I met my now wife. And I went off and got a master's in international relations, and then came back, and that's when I couldn't find a job. Nice. I overeducated myself.
That's when once you finally have all the education, then you're out. There's nothing left.
But it was a bit serendipitous because, unbeknownst to me, of course, this was 12 years ago, roughly at this point, 2011, something like that. So this is when, and as I'm sure you're well aware, in the U.S., the craft spirits movement was just picking up, just getting ahead of steam.
Right.
And so there weren't a lot of educational opportunities, but there were a lot of opportunities for people who just sort of would raise their hand and show up to work on time and be the one who would always volunteer for the bad job. And that's exactly how it was at Journeyman. It was a great place for me to get started and to learn this craft spirits movement in the U.S. kind of went from what we think, maybe at the most 400 distilleries in the U.S. 15 years ago to well over 1,500 now. I know we're probably breaking 2,000 at this point.
Yeah, there's so many.
That's a whole lot of new jobs. But 12 years ago, it was probably 600 distilleries, and it was still a novel thing. So a person without any experience could still work their way up without having already been a distiller somewhere.
How far up did you get at Journeyman, and when did you finally say, okay, it's time for me to open up and try something new? And I hear you came to San Diego, is that right?
Close, Orange County, so just north of San Diego. Yeah, about 45 minutes to an hour south of LA, in a town called Santa Ana.
Santa Ana.
It was about. Do you even know Santa Ana?
I do. That's where the airport is, Santa Ana.
That's exactly where the
John
airport
Wayne.
is. John Wayne. One of the nicest airports there is. I love flying in and out of there.
It's a beautiful airport, yeah.
And about 10 minutes away from Disneyland. So yes, I had an annual pass for a while those still existed. And it was nice. It was 12 or 13 months. It was just over a year at Journeyman. And it wasn't a question of me not wanting to be a journeyman, because it was, and I believe still is, a great place to work. It was more that the two guys, so there was the owner and then the two guys who were above me, were locals, and I drove 45 minutes a day to get there from South Bend. And those two guys drove 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And I knew they had good spots at the distillery and they weren't going anywhere. And they're still there to this day.
Right.
Doug and Tom, and they sort of started me on my learning curve. And I just knew that at Journeyman, they had their spots and they were happy. And it was time for me to see what else was out there. So I kind of took a flyer and applied for a job in California, having never considered California as an option to live in at all, especially the LA area. It just wasn't on the radar at all. And I got a response back from a couple, Robin and Brian Christensen, from the Blinking Owl Distillery in Santa Ana. And they said, "Hey, thank you so much for your application, but we've actually offered the job to somebody. Sorry we didn't get to chat with you. We'll keep your resume or whatever." And I was like, okay, onward and upward. I think I applied to Diageo, and it wasn't Beam Suntory then, but somebody else, and no hope of that with only a year of experience. About 2 weeks later, Robin emailed me back and said, "Hey, so that guy that we offered the job to, he ended up deciding not to come. Would you like to interview?" I said yes. And then, it just kind of went from there.
Great. And how long did you work at the Blinking Owl?
7 years. So
wow.
Longest job I've ever had. And I moved there from Indiana with my partner. And we set up shop there in Santa Ana, which is actually a great place to live. It gets a little bit of a bad rap, but we loved it there. Wouldn't have stayed 7 years if we hadn't. And I was the head distiller, first employee. We did everything from, the only thing I didn't participate in that project was actually buying the equipment, but we did the full build out from a shell of a building to running the distillery. So installing boilers, mills, fermenters, brew house, stills, everything. And then started the brand, and it's a great brand, still going strong. And now Max Stecca, who was my assistant when I left, is now the head distiller there.
Nice. And what spirits do they make there?
We made, the first thing we ever made was a vodka.
Okay.
And I'd never made a vodka all the way from scratch before, from grain. And it was a wheat vodka with a little bit of malted barley in it. And we had a hybrid pot column still with 2 columns next to the pot. That was quite an emotional experience when that first drop comes off of the still of something that you made from the very beginning, and having never done it before on a brand new piece of equipment. Right. It was a lot of pressure, but it worked out, and really, really liked the vodka that we made there. And I wasn't really a vodka drinker until I started making it. It was really fun. The most exciting thing was having the first whiskeys come off and the white spirit tasting really good.
So you're in Santa Ana. You've been here 7 years, did the Disneyland stint. And now, how did you end up in Ireland? Did they call you? Did you be looking? Did you say, it's getting too hot here? I need to get into some rain?
I say it now. I tell people now that when I'm here, they say, "Well, what do you think about the weather? You just came from California. What were you thinking?" California is great. Melissa, my wife, and I, we really, really love California. We made a lot of good friends there. I made a ton of friends and connections in the industry. And I always told people there that I had the best job in booze in California. No one else had the opportunities that I had to do what I was doing the way I was doing it. Brian and Robin pretty much gave me free reign, and we made what we wanted. And it was a really good spot. So 7 years passed, though, and I guess it was the 7-year itch. I don't know. We felt like we'd seen a lot in California. We'd done a lot in California. And you can't ever be bored of the place. There's an infinite amount of things to do. But we did feel like maybe it was time to see what else there was out there. And, we both always wanted to live abroad together. We've done it individually, but never together. And so it was starting. I just sort of started to see what was out there. It wasn't really an active job search. It just sort of was, if it happened, it happened. And I got in touch with the folks here at Connacht Distillery. We started realizing there were a lot of connections. So Connacht was founded by Tom Jensen. He's our CEO. And funny enough, he actually right now lives in Indiana in the same town that I left when I went to California.
Did you just send him back to your old house?
Yeah. So actually, before I got this job, I actually had the chance to go. I was home visiting family and got to meet him. So I got to meet the CEO of an Irish distillery in my hometown in Indiana before I got to come over here.
And is he Irish or is he American?
He's American, but his I think it's his grandmother. I don't think it's his mother. I think it's his grandmother was born and raised just about 20 minutes down the road from where we are now. So we're in Ballina, which is in County Mayo. So if you look at a map of Ireland and you go to the left top west part all the way to the edge, that's where Mayo is. One of the most special and beautiful parts of Ireland, I really believe. 20 minutes over is a town called Tubbercurry, and that's where his grandmother came from. And she was, I think the story goes anyways, 12 or 13 years old, and her mother put a suitcase in her hand and said, you're getting on a boat and you're going to Chicago and you're going to live with your aunt, who she'd never met.
Wow.
Can you imagine being a 13-year-old? Now, Tom, you'll have to correct me, Tom. I'm sorry if I'm telling the story wrong, but this happened to many people in Ireland. Yeah. It's a very common experience here to have been sort of shipped off to the States to supposedly a better life. I think some probably did and some probably didn't. But anyways, that's how Tom came to be. And he wanted to bring back this industry back to Ireland and back to his home area where his ancestral roots are. So that's how we ended up in Ballina. And then Tom was he's a partnership with Rob Cassell, who is the master distiller at New Liberty Distillery in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So they partnered up on the venture, and then they partnered up on this venture. So Rob is our master distiller. He's the one who sort of built all the recipes, built out the distillery. I'm just sort of carrying on that vision. And but the funny part is that Rob and I had actually connected years before, because I was the vice president of the California Artisanal Distillers Guild in California, and we were working on some law changes there, trying to make the situation better for craft distillers in the state of California. And I was pointed to Rob by some other folks who'd been in the industry for a while as an example of somebody who'd worked really well in their state to change the laws and make them better for craft spirits. And so it just very randomly turned out that he and I had actually spoken a few years before. I didn't make the connection until well into the process that who he was and where Tom was from. And so it was all very, very serendipitous. And it just felt like things were falling into place and it made a lot of sense. And so we came over to Ballina to check it out, see what we thought. And
what year was that?
This was it was a year ago in September.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I got here in January of 2022. So.
And how long has the distillery been up and running?
6 years. We're working on 7 years now.
Okay.
2016.
Nice. I think I told you when I originally reached out that the reason I really wanted to go visit was because when I did my ancestry, my biggest concentration of where I'm from is this area. And so I was really hoping we could make it. So I'm determined to get there at some point. And I do have actually an extra flight credit. So hopefully I can get back there in the next year or so and see you in person. But everything I've read and looked at about this area is just gorgeous and beautiful. And I think, why on earth did my family ever leave there? It's gorgeous.
There's lots of beautiful places in Ireland, but Mayo's, I think, a special piece of that pie. But I don't know if you know this or not, but the old saying that comes back from when the English were here and even before that, it's to hell or Connacht. That's where they were going to send all the rebels. And nice. I think there's still a bit of subversive pride about that because back then you couldn't grow anything here in the West. It's too wet and too rocky. Yeah. But that's what makes it really beautiful.
So when you got over there, what was your first task? What would they say? Did you get to start making your own expressions, or were you taking over something they already had?
A little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. I landed, and of course you have to go through all the hey, now I live in another country stuff and getting to know the folks, the team who was already here. And a lot of those first 3 months, let's call it, was familiarization, getting myself up to speed, learning the existing processes, how we got to where we were at that time, what we were making, just, getting familiar with all of our record keeping, our barrel warehouse, how we ship, just all of the different things you have to do when you run a distillery. And then the next 3 months after that were kind of driving down on things like efficiencies, how our processes, making sure we're up to date on compliance, picking back up on maintenance where that had been before, and then starting to sort of form some new relationships with our distributors, with our retail partners, with the community here in Ballina. COVID hit everyone hard, and all in different and subtly unique ways. And around here, the distillery was making hand sanitizer, just like we did in Santa Ana before I got here. But a lot of people, I don't know if the word is forgot or just life got in the way, but we've sort of been on a campaign this year. 2022 has been the return of Connacht Distillery to Mayo, to letting everybody know that we're back, we're in business, we're making whiskey here in your hometown. And yes, I'm not Irish, but a lot of Irish connections in the company, and most of the people who work there are Irish. And we want to be the whiskey of Ballina. We want to be the whiskey of Mayo, the whiskey of the West. That's where we're trying to be. And this has been kind of like our coming back out year, to let everyone know we're here and back in business.
So how many different expressions do you guys have? I know you sent me, 2 questions. Where are you distributed? Do you have any distribution in America yet? And how many different whiskey expressions do you have?
Well, I'll answer the first one first. Yes, we're in the States, mostly on the East Coast. We're distributed by Park Street. So if anybody out there wants to get it, just call up Park Street and they can get it for you. As you know, the state system in the United States is a really tricky thing to navigate.
3-tier,
and
all of that.
One of the 3-tier system, for better or for worse, and all of the above. But it's funny because coming here, part of the reason I wanted to come to another country to do this job was because I wanted to see how other people thought about it, and why not come to the home of whiskey, where whiskey really got its start and blew up around the world. It's Ireland. And they definitely have a different approach to alcohol here, and a subtly different approach to regulation. So a lot of folks have said, "Oh, I can't believe you have to deal with that 3-tier system in the States." And I always took it for granted. I thought that's how the whole world worked.
Yeah.
It's not at all. And so it's been interesting to learn about how in the things you don't have to worry about in Ireland that you do back home in the States. So that's the only caveat there, is that's why we're not all over the country in the U.S. We have to pick our markets, choose our markets carefully, and grow from there. So we have our first batch 1 single malt whiskey is in the States. That's this one.
Guy? Nice.
Yep, you got it. That's it. So you see it says batch 1 there, meaning this is the first series of blends that are going to be called the Connacht single malt.
Nice.
Moving forward, we're going to drop the batches, and we're just going to be that'll be our flagship product. But we wanted to have the first one be the listed as the batch 1. That only came out in August of 21. Oh, wow. So they were really just starting to sell it towards the end of last year. So when I got here in January, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think in January, the next day, so I got here on the 12th on a Thursday, and on Friday I came into the office and the guys were shipping out a shipping container to the States with the first batch 1 on it.
Nice.
At least that's how I remember it. So that is over there. And then we also have our vodka, which is called Straw Boys Vodka. And we also have this product, which is called Ballyhoo.
Oh.
And Ballyhoo is just
Ballyhoo?
sort of a play on a term, an exclamation, sort of like a victory charge or something like that. And this is a sourced grain whiskey that we get from here in Ireland. And we did a couple of sourced products before our batch 1 came out, because as you know, startup distilleries need liquid when they begin, because they don't have their own. We're a 6-year-old company. This is a 4 or 5-year-old malt whiskey. We don't have anything older than that we make, obviously, but the source products are there to fill in that gap until your stuff comes out. Well, the Ballyhoo has done so well, we're going to hang on to it. Nice. There was another line that we're not going to hang on to, but the Ballyhoo has been really good for us, both in the States and Germany, believe it or not. The Germans are really embracing whiskey especially whiskey, single malts for sure. They love their Scotch, but Irish whiskey is having its day right now. Like, this is the best time to be in Ireland if you're in whiskey, because we here, when I say we, in Ireland are starting to have the same craft spirits boom that probably started maybe 10 or 15 years ago in the States. So
Right.
15 years ago in Ireland, there were 3, maybe 4 distilleries, depending on how you want to talk about it. Today, 45 to 50, something like that. Now, that doesn't seem like a whole lot over 15 years, but you got to think about the size of the country. And the amazing part is where the industry was 100 years ago, where it was 15 years ago, and now where it's coming back to.
Yeah. One of the interviews I did was with Bernard Walsh in Dublin. And when we were talking, I said, if I had done this tour of Ireland, 3-5 years ago, I could have hit all of the distilleries. But in the 2 weeks that I was there, now I would need to be there 2 months, and then maybe I'd get everybody. So yeah, I'm very excited that the Irish whiskey is booming and is coming back to its former glory. So I think it's time
lots of reports.
Taste a couple of these things. So you sent me the batch 1. I also have the new make.
We originally had that new make, and then another 200 ml little one of these in a gift pack, so people could start to get to know the brand, because that was the first time you got to see Connacht listed on anything. Right. And of course, the idea there was, with the new make, show where the spirit started and then where the spirit was ending up for us in 4.5 years. But the new make's really fun. I mean, you've probably had a lot of new make in your time. And I always enjoy drinking new make. Most distillers enjoy drinking new make, because that's how we experience our spirit for the most part, most frequently. Are you gonna do some? I'm gonna do some.
Yeah, let's get some of that. Oh yeah, that's got a beautiful nose. When I first started really getting into whiskey, I went to Scotland and did a whiskey tour, and that's when I first had my first new make. And I went to all these places. I'm like, oh, this is so gross. And now, like, my palate has just changed so much that I'm like, how could I have ever thought this was gross?
Absolutely. I totally feel the same way. And it's interesting, though, with your malt whiskey new makes, they're quite drinkable. They can be really expressive. Bourbon new makes, on the other hand, are usually pretty rough, pretty hard to handle. Usually, not always, but usually. Bourbon really changes in the cask. So does malt whiskey. But the thing that I enjoy about our new make, and new make in general here in Ireland, is that you're getting a really good sense of what the spirit could become based on this.
It's very
there's
creamy.
A through line. Yeah, there's a through line that goes to the finished product that stays there. With ours, it's very much about the barley. It's 100% Irish grown barley, malted on the island. We get it within sometimes a day or two of it coming out of the kilns. Super fresh. We're keeping our carbon footprint down by getting it here on the island. And it's really representative of where it comes from. We get it all from the southeast side of the country versus the northwest where we are. But it's only 3.5 hours away. Right. I get a lot of grassiness off of it, which you commonly do off of a new make spirit, but it's really in touch with the grain. I think our new make is really in touch with the grain, with the malt, and it's expressing it quite well. It's an ale malt that we use. It's not super common, although more and more common in the craft spirits world, as opposed to a distiller's malt, which would typically be used to help boost starch conversion with lots of enzymes, favoring starch over proteins, higher starch, lower proteins. That's your typical distiller's malt. We're seeing a lot more now, and we're doing it. We've embraced it. Rob Cassell, pioneered that here for us, that we want to stick with malts that are typically used in beer brewing, because you're favoring flavor over the potential for alcohol. And we might shave a bit, a few tenths of a percent or maybe 1% of ABV off of that potential yield, but we're also bringing to the table some flavor characteristics that might have been lost otherwise. And I know it's a buzzword; it's very buzzy. Terroir in relation to whiskey. Because some folks will say there's no way. You're boiling the alcohol. You're boiling the water, essentially, in the stills. How could you possibly have terroir come through the whiskey in the end? Well, let me put it to you this way. Let's say that we get 50% of our flavor from the barrel, 40 to 60% of our flavor from the barrel. That's fine. So where's all the rest coming from? Well, whiskeys taste different all over the world and through all the different distilleries. So every whiskey would taste the same if the raw ingredients and where they came from were not important, but they don't, which means that it is important. So I fall on the side of there is a way to express terroir in whiskey.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I firmly believe that there is a way to express terroir in whiskey as well. I just poured the single malt.
Oh, yep.
And I'm smelling it against the new make.
Do you see the through? I mean, can you get it?
Yeah,
Can
I
you
do.
see
I smell the new make in the single malt, but it definitely
Now,
changes to a more mellow, sweetness on the nose.
yeah. So we are the first to admit, and it's not a thing we're afraid to admit. It's part of the process, but that it's only a 4-year-old whiskey. That's very young for a malt whiskey. Malt whiskeys need a lot of time to break down in the barrels. But we wouldn't have released it. The team that was here before me wouldn't have released it if it wasn't ready, if it wasn't good, if they weren't proud of it. And we are proud of it. It's won a lot of awards, actually.
Right.
But that 4-year-old whiskey means that it's going to be a brighter experience. I tend to think of younger whiskeys as being sort of pointy on a flavor spectrum, whereas older whiskeys tend to shave off those points and be a little bit more mellow, more in the middle. So some people might enjoy a young, bright whiskey that really pops on the top or has a very interesting low note or something like that. And I think that's where we fall right now with this one. Now we're going to keep progressing the age of our spirits. This first one is everything's in it at least 4 years old. Well, most of the barrels that we're going to be putting into the next blends are in the 5-year-old category already. So by 2023, we're going to be pushing 6 years old. We may or may not do an age statement release. We haven't decided yet. Probably wouldn't be until the 8-year range anyways. But just know, as consumers, continue to drink this whiskey because it's going to be evolving.
Okay. All right. Let's taste this. Oh, wow. That's nice. I can taste the grassy notes. Mm-hmm. It's got a little hint of spice.
So it's we present it at 47% ABV. That way we get away from any chill filtration. We don't need to worry about that. And also gives the consumer a lot of choice, the bartender a lot of choice in how they work with that extra ABV. And it's finished in sherry butts, big 500-liter sherry butts. Which is what gives it some of that roundness that you're talking about. It takes that malt whiskey, gives it a hint of what you think of as sweetness. It's not sugar, but that sherry gives it that sweet note and savory roundness. And it gives it more of a chance to oxidize and esterify in the barrel, which is always what we're after in whiskey.
That's fantastic. Well, these are all delicious. I'm very excited that you can get. Can you get the new make here in the U.S. too, or just the single?
Well, I take that. What I'll say is that was sort of a one-off presentation in the little 200 ml sample bottle, but we are making something here that is basically the cousin of that one. That one was at 47% also, just like the single malt, but we have a 45% called Puccin. Did you hear Puccin when you were here?
Yes. I went to a Puccin bar. With Puccin.
Oh, wow.
It's great.
It's a whole thing. Puccin's having a moment. So for the people who don't know, it's the Irish cousin to America's moonshine. Yeah. It's white spirit. It's basically new make. And that our Puccin is our new make for the single malt whiskey. So you can still repeat that. You can repeat this on your own if you get a bottle of the Puccin and a bottle of the new make and try it right off the stills, dilute it down to 45%, and then 4 years later out of the cask.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, I actually had it's called a Belfast coffee instead of an Irish coffee.
Okay.
And it's with Puccin instead of whiskey, and it's a cold brew instead of hot brew. And oh my gosh, it's fantastic.
That sounds great. I need to try that.
It's very good. Obviously you have to get good coffee for it, but yeah.
Well,
yeah. And, with the whipped cream on top, of course.
Yeah.
The thick cream. Yep. Fantastic. Okay. So what is your 5-year plan with this distillery? What do you guys think you're going to be putting out?
Well, we're definitely going to keep driving the flagship malt whiskey. That's sort of the priority. Making sure that stays as good as it is, and just gets better. So that's number one. Number two is growing the footprint. We're designed to be a bigger distillery than we are right now, as far as production numbers go. So we want to maximize our production space, our production floor, produce more whiskey, get more barrels laid down. But that's stuff that all distilleries want to do.
Right.
The other things are coming out with some innovation, some new product lines that challenge the drinker, bring some new flavors to the front. We actually have this year, so my first year that I've been here, we actually have two new products coming onto the market. One is our Straw Boys whiskey. So our vodka is called Straw Boys. Our poutine is called Straw Boys.
And
now
what is
we're
the
going to have
Straw
a whiskey
Boys
to go along with
significance? Is that like
sorry, I didn't
Dingle
talk
Man?
about that.
No, is it like the Dingle Man?
Similar.
Okay.
Yes, similar.
Okay.
So it's the pointy straw hat.
Right.
Well, traditionally, and we're talking 1800s or around there, the Straw Boys would basically be modern day wedding crashers. They'd show up to wedding parties, dance with the bride, dance with the groom, drink a bunch of whiskey, and then run away. So, and they had their straw hats would actually come down and cover their eyes so that you couldn't tell who they were. Of course, everyone knew who they were, but that was sort of the tradition and the idea. So we're sort of tapping into that celebratory and cultural heritage aspect of the Straw Boys story. So we're going to have a family of Straw Boys products, and that Straw Boys whiskey is kind of the next evolution of that. And that's actually going to be the base spirit that we use for the Ballyhoo, which is a port cask finished grain whiskey. And we're just going to have the grain whiskey by itself. So that's a 4-year-old grain whiskey in the Straw Boys. Right now it's only in Europe, in the EU, but we'll see if it goes to the US. And then one of the innovations that we're coming out with is a port cask aged gin. So it's our gin, our Concullen gin, that lived in a port cask for probably over a year, actually, because it was meant to be released a little bit early, but we drug our feet on that. So we got a little extra time, and it's really lovely.
Wow. And how deep is the color on that?
It's sort of a ruby. It's not
nice.
Super dark because it was a once used cask. We actually had an aged gin when the distillery first opened up, and it's those same casks again. So it's going to be sort of a tamed down version of the original. So if people have had the original, they'll kind of know what to expect.
Great. Well, fantastic. Ryan, thank you so much for telling me your story and sharing everything about the distillery and your previous distilleries with us today. It's been fantastic getting to know you. If people wanted to find you on social media or find the brand to buy, what would be the best place for them to go?
Yeah, first, make sure you go to Connacht Whiskey. We're on all the social media platforms at CONNACHT, or as the Irish say, HT. Connacht Whiskey. Look us up. And then I'm posting, when I came over here, I set up a new Instagram account called An American Distiller in Ireland. So look for Ryan in Ireland or An American Distiller in Ireland, and you'll see a lot of posts about what we're doing, sort of behind the scenes stuff, anything that we're out and about, you'll see it there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, and we will catch up with you at a later date.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Carrie. Cheers.
Like what you've seen on BRC? Want to see more? Experience more? And maybe even taste more? Then head over to our Ko-fi site and become a member of the Barrel Room Parlor. By choosing the copper level membership, you'll have exclusive access to videos related to topics discussed on the podcast and blog posts for members only. As an Amber member level, you'll enjoy everything from our copper level as well as various spin-off series including The Cutting Room Floor and Kindred Spirits. In addition, the Amber membership includes exclusive discounts to live in-person events. To join, visit www.barrelroomchronicles.com and click on Become a Member in the navigation bar. Or go straight to our Ko-fi site at ko-fi.com/BRC and click on the membership link. Once you've joined, you'll have access to everything your chosen level has to offer. You'll even be able to participate with the show by commenting on videos and other posts. Don't wait. Sign up today for exclusive content and event discounts in the Barrel Room Parlor. That does it for today's show. To read notes on this episode or learn more about our guests, please visit barrelroomchronicles.com. Want to interact with the show or have questions for our guests? Then ask them on our socials or send us an email through our website. Or better yet, leave us a voicemail on our Anchor page, and your recording might be played in our new Speakeasy segment. If you like what you heard, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. If you really liked it and you want to show your support, buy us a whiskey through our Ko-fi site at ko-fi.com/BRC, or become an exclusive member of the Barrel Room Parlor, where you'll get exclusive content not seen anywhere else. If you work in the whiskey or spirits industry, or just have a deep passion for whiskey and want to share your spirits journey, register to be a guest through our website. Last but not least, please enjoy your spirits responsibly. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, Solange-va.
Barrel Room Chronicles is a production of First Reel Entertainment and is distributed by Anchor FM and is available on Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.